that's okay.
Because
So you just gonna hold it the entire time?
yeah. Hey everybody,
Hey.
How are you doing?
Hello, everyone.
Hey, it's Frederick and Jean Watts, and this is
11:60 seconds. We're back.
Yay.
This is gonna be crooked, but I'm not holding that, so that's what's gonna happen.
So we want to welcome you guys back. Or thanks for tuning in this week. Last week we were
2 weeks we were gone.
2 weeks
out of the country.
Okay. And had issues going
Vacationing.
on. And so we just wanted to get back and welcome you guys
We didn't
back.
have any issues. We were out of town.
Yeah, we also had some.
The heat, the air conditioning. When we did our show, we did it with the air conditioning was out.
We also had a family issue.
Oh, you talking about death in the family? Okay. All right, I thought you were talking about personal issues.
No,
So, yeah.
not at all. Nope. So,
Yeah,
welcome back. We're going to get right into it. We're going to try not to be long tonight, but hopefully give you some good information that can help you in marriage and relationships. Tonight, we're going to talk about, I guess, going from bitter to better.
Yeah.
I think that's a good topic for people that may have some issues, that are dealing with some things in life that have made you bitter, or some experiences that have
You're just doing a lot of hands.
that have caused you to, look at life in a different way, when God wants you to look at life in a joyous, better way.
Absolutely. Being bitter comes from having situations or circumstances that have, I guess, things that have happened to you in your relationship or in your life, and you begin to harbor those things and, not really being able to express yourself and not really being able to talk through those things. A lot of times those things can cause bitterness. So we want to talk about like what causes bitterness first. And then we want to talk about how to get to a place where you are released from bitterness, because bitterness, the Bible says it dries the bones. It's not something that you want to have, because it is toxic for your relationships, for all of your relationships, not just that one relationship that you have gotten bitterness from, but from all of your relatielships.
Right. Yeah. So, what part do you want to talk about first?
I'm going to talk about it again. I just talked about my part.
Well, one example when we talk about life situations and things that could make you bitter. There's a story in the Bible about Naomi, which is in the book of Ruth. And Naomi was not only, she was a wife at first and a mother.
Sure.
And her name meant joy.
Right.
So, or actually it meant my joy. So when you spoke to Naomi and called her name, you were saying my joy. Hey, how you doing? Because that was the name that was given to her. But in her life, she experienced tragedy.
Yeah.
She lost her husband, and then she also lost her sons.
Yeah.
And those things, those life experiences, and these are all experiences that we have, made her bitter.
Yeah.
And why, if you read the Bible and you see why it made it bitter, because she changed her name.
Yeah.
When she went back to her homeland, she didn't want to be called Naomi.
Yeah,
she wanted to be called, I think, Mara, which meant my sorrow. So one thing that we encourage you in life is that don't let life situations make you bitter.
So, yeah, and I want kind of to just elaborate on that a little bit, of that part. Her life was full of joy. Everything was good. She was happy. She had a beautiful husband. She had beautiful sons. Everything was great. And then things just fell apart. And sometimes in life and in your relationships, things can just suddenly fall apart. Somebody can make a bad choice. Your husband, your wife makes a bad choice, can cause you to have some pain and cause you injury, because that's what happened with Naomi. She was caused injury due to nothing that she had any control over or anything that she did, but it happened to her. And so by that thing happening to her, it broke her heart. It broke her spirit. Right. And so her spirit was broken. So she couldn't find a way to be happy. Right. So she was like, don't even mention joy to me. Don't even mention happiness to me. Right. Say that, call me broken, call me bitter. You know what I mean? So that being said, you have to take those situations and not internalize them. You got to find a way, as we know that Naomi eventually did, to find joy again.
And God wants you to never lose that joy.
Absolutely.
He wants you to never lose that peace, that happiness, because even though, like Naomi's situation, life situations caused her to have a moment of that, that's natural. You're gonna have times when you feel like, oh man, in this relationship, in this marriage, I've hit rock bottom, or I had some situation that has hurt me or broken me. But God has given us also examples, like if you look at Joseph, the life of Joseph, even when he was in his most lowest place, even when he was in prison, even when he was in the pit, before he got to the other places, he never lost his joy.
Right.
And even with Naomi, she struggled. And even though her mindset might have been, oh, you know what, I'm changing my name. But, when you come back to it, the reality, she was blessed because even though she was in a place of sorrow, God was able to heal.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times we need to, as a couple or as a spouse, you have to sometimes carry. Now, her person to carry was Ruth. Right. They said, no, I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to let you go through this. I got your back. And really, Ruth's example is basically how spouses should love each other. And say, now, no matter good or bad, things that have been brought together, that we caused, I got your back. I'm not going to let you fall. We're going to go through this together.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember you said something to me some time ago, and you said, I am going to keep loving you no matter, even if you push me away, I'm going to keep loving you. I'm going to keep staying right here if you push me away. And that is like unconditional love. That is consistent love. To be able to love somebody and to be able to be there for somebody, even if that person attempts to reject you or attempts to push you away, to still love that person. It takes a great amount of strength to be able to do that. It takes a great amount of character to be able to love somebody who's acting like they're not sure about what they're gonna love you back or not. And even in those types of situations, it takes prayer, it takes God, it takes, like I said, it takes an inner strength to be able to do that. And there are times that situations that we go through as couples that can cause us brokenness, can cause us hurt, can cause us harm, can cause us confusion. Right. And if we let it stay, if we let that bitterness stay, like if that person did something to us and we let that hurt fester and we don't release that hurt, I heard somebody say a long time ago, forgiveness is giving up your right to be angry. And you may have a legitimate right to be angry. You may have a legitimate right to be really disappointed in your spouse, or whether it's your past spouse. You may have a really legitimate gripe and you can be angry, but forgiveness is giving up that right. And you don't necessarily forgive for that person. You forgive for you. Yourself. You forgive for yourself so that you are freed from that bitterness. Because again, it says bitterness dryeth the bones. I have seen people be in relationships and the other person left them or did something really horrible to them, and that person ended up dying. And I had a friend, and I'm not going to say her name, but I had a person die. Young lady, she was, I think maybe in her 30s or 40s. Actually, two people I know that this happened to, and died. And supposedly, there was nothing wrong with them. They had nothing wrong with them. So really, they must have died from a broken heart. Right. But of course, and also letting that grief and that bitterness just take them down.
Right.
And, God, that's not God's plan. Right. If somebody is really at the point where they really fully just walking out of your life and they are being, just cantankerous and ignorant, think, let them keep on walking.
Right.
Let them keep on going. You know what I'm saying? But, God definitely wants to keep your marriage together. He wants to bless your life. He wants to bless your union. And then, if you're at a place where you're looking for God to bless you, if you're single, you're looking for God to bless you, God is desirous of blessing you.
Right.
He wants to bless you, and he has somebody for you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You just have to wait on him to receive the right person.
That's
so,
true.
not letting that bitterness, not letting that hurt, take you completely out. You got to release that hurt and give that hurt back over to God. And, it's a daily walk. It's not something that you be like, oh, all of a sudden you go to a service and you just shout it out, I'm free. Sometimes that happens, but most of the time it doesn't happen. Most of the time that healing is a process.
Right. And even this pertains to whether you're married or if you're not married. God wants to take you from bitter to better.
Absolutely.
And even if you're looking to get married and talking to some of our single people that might tune in, you don't ever let a bad situation or change your life. Don't ever let a bad situation take you from being positive. Don't let it steal your joy. Don't let it make you bitter, because if you're bitter, then you can't go into a relationship looking for all these high expectations if you're damaged.
Absolutely.
And we've already talked about damaged goods and how that can affect you when you're trying to openly communicate. So we're encouraging you guys today is that, when you look at the story of Naomi and Ruth, Ruth, even when she was supporting Naomi and sort of just using her as how a spouse would support their spouse even in bad times, it should be unconditional. Yeah. Be like, I'm your ride or die. I'm going to be with you no matter what goes through, what we go through. Or even in the case of Joseph, when you're in a place that is rough, that is tough, that hurts, have a positive attitude. Because if you believe that Christ is, that you're going to be above only and not beneath, and that if you're head and not the tail, that even in the process of God trying to work some things out in you, if you have a positive attitude like Joseph did, it is easy for God to move when he needs to move in your life.
Absolutely.
Because you're still believing. And don't let your spouse, don't let a situation, don't let you losing your job, don't let your kids, don't let anything take away your joy and take away and make you bitter, because God can't use you in a bitter state. Absolutely. He can only use you in a state of thankfulness.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And he can, he wants to keep you in a place of surrender to him. And so as you do that, keeping Christ in the center and keeping Christ in the middle of your relationship, again, having those places where it's really hard, where it's really you're going through, it's hard not to be, if somebody does something to you to be bitter. And then, if you get to the place where you have been bitter or you are bitter, how do you go back? How do you get back from there? How do you get, like you said, from bitter to better? How do you get, you got to, again, release, and then a lot of times people do not want to own up to their bitterness. Right. They say, oh, I'm not bitter. I'm fine. I'm good. And you are, because every time you talk to your spouse, or every time you in a situation or talk to your ex-spouse, you are cantankerous and evil acting. If they come on over to pick up the kids, you're like, you stupid. You know what I'm saying? Or, you looking at them like they're stupid. Right. You are bitter. Right. And you have to really come to grips with that. You know what I'm saying? And you have to have a moment where you understand that you have received that into your spirit, but you got to release that out of your spirit, and you got to let God deal with you with regard to it. You got to give yourself permission to be human. You can be angry, but you don't have to be bitter. Right. What I'm saying? And that's human. The Bible says, be angry, but sin not. You are human, so be human. And understand that you can be angry, that you're going to be angry, that you're going to be upset, especially if your spouse has done something to offend you. Right. If your spouse has done something to hurt you, if they have, disrespected you in some kind of way, or they're mistreating you in some kind of way, or they just mean to you, or they just not, because you can have sometimes, spouses that seem like they're super nice to everybody else in the world, but they're not nice to their spouse. Right. What is wrong with that? That's not cool, but it happens.
And that's something I want to talk about a little bit later, about how you set the tone, and especially a man, how you set the tone in your home, is what comes out of your home. But I like what you said about being bitter, because this doesn't even have to be about a spousal relationship. You can have, a lot of times people have been hurt in so many different areas, even in the church. Like they'll be in ministry, and then you'll find yourself complaining and talking about how you feel and things that you feel are wrong and how you were wronged and all that. And it's because you've been hurt. And you don't even realize that you might even have some bitterness because of your hurt. You know, everybody in a relationship, in ministry, on your job, you want to feel appreciated, you want to feel valued, you want to feel loved.
In every part.
You want in every part. And if you don't get those feelings as humans, emotions will cause you sometimes to be bitter.
Yeah.
So how do you get from that state to being better?
Well, yeah. I think the first thing that you have to do when you are in a state of bitterness is that you have to be grateful for where you are. You have to be grateful for any good that you have in your life. You have to learn to be grateful for that. God, there's even a song that says, be grateful. You know, God desires to feel your longing. Every pain that you feel, he feels them just like you. So God is very in tune with what you are dealing with. But you definitely, have got to, find places. I mean, and again, if it's in your spousal relationship, find something to be grateful for. I was listening to a story Miles Monroe had spoken about some time ago, and he talked about a woman who really wanted her husband to come to church with her, and he would not come. He would be out, drinking and partying and doing God knows what, all hours of the night. And when he would get home, it would be like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And she would be, fighting with him and, why you got to go out and do all of this stuff. And it seemed like she had nothing to be grateful for in her marriage, nothing to be grateful for in her relationship. And it was like, he is mistreating me and he needs to come to church. He needs to get his life. And Miles Monroe gave her some amazing, amazing advice. He said, when he comes home at 3 o'clock in the morning drunk, she said, thank him for coming home. And she was like, what? I'm not thanking this ninja for coming. You know what I'm saying? He shouldn't be out in the first place. He said, thank him for coming home. And she said, fine, fine, Pastor, I'm going to do it. And that woman began to have a spirit of gratitude and a spirit of thankfulness for just that one good part. Because if you think about it, if he out partying and drinking and doing God knows what, he don't got to come home. Right. He can spend the night where he at.
Right.
But he came home every night. It was just, or every morning, early in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. But she would say, thank you, honey, for coming home. Is there anything I can do for you? And in a matter of time, that man's heart began to be so convicted because he couldn't believe how his wife, he didn't deserve that treatment, but he couldn't believe how kind she was being to him, right, and how she had changed. And that ultimately caused him to change. Right. And at the end of the day, long story short, in between, that man ended up coming to Christ, coming to church with his wife, and he would be beating his wife to church.
Wow. I mean, that's awesome because it was really for both people.
Absolutely.
It was her healing that she needed because had she been bitter, had she not, taken that to heart, she really couldn't have witnessed to that husband.
That's
and
right.
That the situation probably wouldn't have changed. And what I like about that is that, that's what the home is supposed to be. So when you're in a relationship, a lot of times you have to just, it doesn't mean, a lot of times people say, oh, you got to do this and do that, but they take out the humanity
right.
of realism of life, which is that, man, there's going to be times when you want to slap, knock them over the head, choke them, all those things, because that's human. We're in flesh. But what we're saying, to get from bitter to better, and is not to let the negative things in life affect the positive attitude that you have, that joy that you have. Because even we have a situation, we have our sons are all doing well and doing things, and God has spoken certain dreams and certain promises in their lives, and it seems like in one area, these promises aren't coming to pass, even though that everything is set up. And so at one point in my life, I got pretty much bitter, being like, well, I'm going to give up, or maybe it's just not meant to be, or forget the promise, but a lot of times when you're in these situations, in the relationships, it could be in finances, it could be in all these things, really God is doing a work. And it's sort of like a dog. A dog can give birth like every 2 months to a litter of puppies. It's common for him. But an elephant only gives birth every 2 years.
Right.
And he only gives birth to one usually
Right.
one, whatever it's called, a pup, elephant or
Right.
whatever.
Baby
So to the dog is giving birth 5 or 6 times already, and it'll look like to him the elephant's not even pregnant,
Right.
but the elephant is pregnant because he has something greater.
That's right.
And because of that, because it's something greater, it takes a work
Hallelujah.
that God has to do.
Yes.
And a lot of times we want to get from bitter to better, but we want it prematurely. And if you have a premature baby, that baby may be a blessing, but it's not as strong as it would be if had it been birthed at the appointed time. So what God is saying, and what we're trying to tell you today, is that sometimes in the process of going to that, is that you have to just have patience. And if you can get through it without patience, it's hard. But if you have joy and you have faith, it makes it easier and it makes it quicker for God to do the work. Because a lot of times you might not be ready for what God has for you.
That's true.
So don't be so quick to be like, I want the dog blessing. I want these birthing things to come out, because it's common. It's common. Look, dogs have puppies and litters all the time. But if you want something extraordinary, if you want something great, something that's unique, something that's big,
that's right,
you might have to be pregnant for a long time. And being pregnant, I don't know, I know from my part, is just uncomfortable. So for the woman, it's uncomfortable.
It's terrible.
It's uncomfortable. But don't let that process make you bitter, because there's a promise to the process.
Absolutely. That's 100%. And that goes not just, like I said, this particular, content that we're sharing right now is not necessarily just for the married people, or the single people, or the divorced people, or people that's looking to be married. It's for everybody. You know what I'm saying? From bitterness, it is terrible when it comes to your relationship, and you can be bitter against your mom, and it affects you and your husband. Mm-hmm. You can be bitter against your employer, and it affects your relationship at home. Bitterness is just a disease that you just do not want to have. Right. Because not only that, it also causes, I really believe, a lot of physical diseases. People harboring unhealthy emotions, and you are not rejuvenating yourself. You're not freeing yourself from all this, like people say, negative energy. You got all this negative energy going around, and you are not really becoming, you're not letting that stuff go, and it's just staying with you. And again, it'll cause unhealthy, not only things in your relationship, but unhealthy things in your marriage. And you don't want that. And if you have bitterness, you cannot have intimacy. If you can't have intimacy, you cannot have real trust. You can't have real trust. You can't have real true love. You can't have real true love. You can't have great sex. I mean, not for real. You know what I'm saying? You really can't. Not the best kind. You know what I'm saying? So, and God wants you to have all of the good stuff. He wants you to have he wants all of your stuff to be great, including, your intimacy with your spouse and your, your sexual relationship, all of that. He wants all of that to be at the top. And because he created it, and you cannot have that with bitter or angry feelings that you've been harboring. Also, you have to rejuvenate yourself. You have to really, get to the root of, trying to go from bitter to better. You got to get to the root of what's making you bitter. What do you feel like what need was not met that hurt you? Where did somebody else, where did they fail? Did they not make you feel absolutely wonderfully loved? Or did they just betray you? Or did they, deny you something? What was it that you got to come to grips with that part, right, where you felt the letdown was? Find out where the letdown was. Okay, you were being a jerk, or you cheated on me, or you lied on me, or you lied to me, or you don't do consistently what you say you're going to do. Mm-hmm. You got to find out what it is that's bothering you, and the place where the breakdown is. And once you find that place, then you can build up from there, because you can understand something about yourself, because you got to understand something about yourself before you understand anything about anybody else.
Right. That's true. And that means sometimes having to relive, that pain. Yeah. But it's a process. Mm-hmm. I mean, to be able to go from bitter to better, you have to have a foundation of what it is. And that's what we're trying to just sort of get tonight. I said, don't let that foundation not be joy and be happiness. Mm-hmm. Once you understand, and it's okay to admit it, don't be, we just want to be real, is that marriage, relationships, people, we're all flawed. We all have issues. We all have things that you have to work through. But when you're Christ-centered, that gives you a hope that there is a promise to be victorious in every aspect of your life.
Absolutely.
So,
no, I'm just agreeing.
And so when we're talking about bitter to better, transitioning maybe back a little bit to marriage couples and household, it's important that if you are married, is that your household is a reflection. Basically charity starts at home, right? So everything that that you have that you establish in the home then reflects outside the home, meaning that you make your home a happy place.
Yeah.
That place. If your house is happy and your home is happy and your wife is happy, your life is happy.
That's
your
right.
children are happy, everything. And it's a reflection of what happens outside your home. Because your home should be a desirable destination.
Absolutely.
And whenever you're bitter, like even I think I'd shared an example about, sometimes men, even though the wife creates the home, creates the atmosphere of the home, the beauty of the home, the man still sets the tone.
Absolutely.
So if you have had a bad day at work or had a issue, you can be dealing with certain things. If you let those issues come inside your home, then that affects your relationship.
Yep.
So you have to be able to have some type of effort to not bring those things. And then spouses, if your husband, like I like to play golf a lot, my wife lets me play because it's also a stress reliever for me. So she knows that sometimes, just letting me go play golf a little bit or getting out, even though we want to spend some time together, it's a stress reliever for me. I come back, relieved or de-stressed, able to handle, issues maybe we have home, paying bills or, taking care of some things. And then, also that's just one area of our life, but then we do a lot of things together. But if I was to, as a man, take everything that the weight of the world and bring it into the house, it's going to bother you. And then that's going to mess up our relationship.
Absolutely.
We're not going to be able to communicate and be able to effectively love one another. So always, when you're in relationships, you got to make your house a happy place, a destination that you don't want to come to. If you don't want to come to your home, if you don't want to come home every night,
that's your fault.
That's your fault. And there's some issues that you need to change. And as a man, that starts with you. The wife takes care of certain things, but the tone of the home starts with you.
100%. I 100% agree. It absolutely does, because my husband, whatever mood he's in, the majority of the time, that's the mood that I'm in. If he's in a good, happy, laughing mood, 99% of the time, I am in that same kind of mood. And if I'm not in that same kind of mood, he kind of brings me back into that mood. When he's trying to look at the other screen without his glasses, guys, he's not staring you down. He's just trying to read without his glasses on. So another thing that you want to do when you're, and this is like my final point. I don't know about how many points you have, but my final point in my studies is that, again, you really want to be in touch with your own feelings. We talked about getting to the bottom of, what's making you act the way you're acting, but you want to be really in touch with your own feelings and, saying, hey, this bothers me. And I had to get to a place, even in our relationship and in our marriage, I said to, my husband, I said, listen, I don't want to hold anything in anymore. Like if I'm upset with something, I don't want to hold it in. So I would be like, I'm going to say it. This is how it is. And I would not say it, I have to wait till, if something made me angry, you don't tell somebody something that made you angry while you're angry.
Right.
You have to take a moment, step back, and not be in your feelings, and then you go and you share it later.
Right.
And then when you do that, you can share it a little bit better and say, without being, hurling accusations or being belligerent about it. You can say, hey, this bothered me, or hey, I felt like you were acting kind of this way the other day. And Sometimes they can take it a little bit better
Right.
when you say it that way.
Yeah, but that never happens with us. No, but yeah, that's true. You have to be able to accept it. But that goes back to strengthening your home. If a man strengthens his home, basically, if he strengthens his love for his wife,
Yeah,
then he strengthens his home.
absolutely.
Because that means being able to take positive criticism, being able to accept when you're wrong, not be so prideful. Men don't like to make mistakes, or admit when they're wrong.
Right.
It's like it's a sign of weakness, and a lot of us in our generation, we had instances in our lives where if you were weak, you weren't successful, or you don't want to show that. Just as a man, you never want to show weakness. But being loving your wife is not being weak. But being weak and not loving your wife is really being weak.
Super weak.
And that's super weak because you're not strengthening your home. And that's really important because once you strengthen your wife and you get then your marriage and your home life is much better.
Yeah.
And that'll take away from if your wife is bitter, and it has something to do with you as a man then you have to address her needs.
Yeah.
Don't let that woman walk around bitter because you're never going to be happy.
Right.
Because the man sets the tone. The Bible says that even men ought to love their wives as their own bodies. So if your wife is acting up, she got an attitude, it's your fault. Majority of the time, if you are not loving her the way that Christ commanded you to love her. Mm-hmm. If you're mistreating her, if you're abusing her, if you're talking to her crazy, if you're not showing her love, do you do that to your own body? Do you cut yourself? If you do, you got a demon.
Exactly.
You have issues. You have problems. So why would you treat your better half? Why would you treat your spouse in any other way than the way God commanded you, which was to love him as you love yourself? If you do that, then you're strengthening your marriage.
Absolutely.
And if you're doing that, and even a woman, if your husband has issues that is causing to be bitter, once you guys talk about it, and a lot of times it's something that's simple, but once you communicate, then you're able to strengthen it because all the enemy's tricks is really simple. Once he can get in and divide and conquer and separate and cause communication to be lacking in the home and in a relationship, then that's the road to separation.
Absolutely.
So you have to strengthen yourself. And then, if you love your wife, you need to love your wife as you love yourself. Yeah. That's just Bible.
That's right. Exactly. That's not just with your wife. I think that's with you as a woman. I'm speaking to the ladies now. There was and this was a couple of days ago. I was like, my husband had been out of town. We had been out of town. And then my husband had to go out of town for training and then he had to come back. And I really missed him. And I was like being like such a baby. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I really, why is he not like really coddling me and not being all over me like normal? Why is he not like, grabbing me and kissing me and holding me in the face? I was like, oh, really though? And I was like, oh, I'm going to just be quiet and I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to be tripping out about it. And I was in my bathroom putting on my makeup and the Lord spoke to me. He said, why don't you give him what it is that you desire? And I went up to him and I looked him in the face and I kissed him and I said, I love you so much. I missed you so much. I'm so happy to be married to you. And and he lit up like a kid. He lit up like a baby. And then he started saying everything that I wanted. He started saying it back to me. And so I was able to get what I needed because I gave what I needed. And sometimes you have to do that. You have to give what you need in order to get what you need. Are you sowing? You reap what you sow. So are you sowing that? Are you giving that? Are you granting that? If you do that, then sometimes you can get it back. You and I did that to you, did you?
I got a story too.
Oh my God. Okay,
No, but we're talking about how to go from bitter to better, which is just great. And a lot of times, my thought process in that situation was that, oh, hey, I'm happy, I'm just chilling. I'm just happy to be back, but didn't recognize, honestly, at the point what she desired. But as soon as, I received it, I was able to kick it in and knowing what my wife wanted. And the same works the other way around. But before I say that, one principle that I live about before I share this, my story about her, is that I really believe what Ephesians says about how to relate. And this is in any relationship that makes it successful, is that if you are kind-hearted, be kind to one another.
Yeah.
Be tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as Christ has forgiven, God is forgiving you. You know, and that, if you just put that principle, that one scripture, and live by that, you're going to have a successful relationship. Because my story was, we were getting dressed for church the other day, and my wife, our kids were running late, so she decides to leave, and we have separate cars sometimes that we drive. And she said, well, I'm going to drive your car. You know, okay, so
it's a convertible Audi, guys.
No, it doesn't even. It's just a little sports car that we both enjoy driving, but that's my car. So she leaves, and about 10 minutes later, she comes back. I'm like, why are you back? And she comes back. She's like, oh man, I had a little incident. I was like, well, are you okay or whatever? And like a long story short, she had sideswiped another car on accident. Now, immediately my first reaction, I'm like, that's just a car, you know, and that has, as long as you're okay, I can get another car, I can get this car fixed. And I generally felt that way because it meant nothing. That's a material thing. But knowing that had I reacted in a way that would have, you know, caused me, oh man, you wrecked my car, that would have really have hurt her feelings. It really would have made her insecure. And it really would have, you know, I could have been justified, sort of to be upset, but I loved her enough to be kind-hearted, to be tender-hearted. And I didn't care. It got a scratch. We got insurance. We get it fixed. And I honestly felt that way because me being tender-hearted caused her to even love me even more, you know, even to sow into me even more. And honestly, you know, I care less about that, you know, that situation, because I try to live by those principles. Because men, in all situations, you set the tone. Had I went high, she probably would have went higher. Meaning, she probably said, "Well, had you been on time, and I wouldn't have had to drive your car, and I wouldn't have crashed your car." You know, all the things that you women do in the way that you think. You know, because we're not going to win those fights. But because we set attitudes and to set the tone in the home, that'll also cause you men to have your spouse get from bitter to better. So I challenge you guys today, men, to set the tone in your home, set the tone in your marriage. When you have a strong marriage, where our marriage is not perfect, our home is not perfect, but we try to be Christ-centered. And if we're Christ-centered, we have a light that shines. And if we have a light that shines, then it's exposed to the world. And so people will see our relationship, see the Christ in us. And then, you know, we're able to be honest and share our faults and share our struggles. But the main center and the main focus is always Christ.
Absolutely. That's what will give your marriage and your life success. And that is really trying to, and even if you have a spouse who is not quote unquote saved, just having godly principles, because you can have godly principles and your spouse not be saved or, going to church or whatever. Mm-hmm. You can have godly principles and start there. And the more you have those godly principles, and you can still pray with your spouse if your spouse is not saved. Right. You know what I'm saying? Or you can still pray for them out loud and let them hear you praying for them. Right. You know what I'm saying? Because prayer is one of the greatest acts of love. Yeah. When my husband prays for me and I hear him pray for me, he has my whole heart. I am melted when I hear him praying for me. But I pray for him as well and let him hear me pray for him. Yeah. And those types of things, when you have that type of communication to God and to one another, it helps to keep those bitter places and those places where you resent your spouse out. Because again, resentment and bitterness, it is a cancer for your relationship. It just does not, if you're going to be married, you might as well be happy. Right, you know what I mean? Right. You might as well enjoy being married to that person, especially, a lot of us women, waited for, this person. You want to be, you want to enjoy it. You want to enjoy being, and not be like, dang, is this what marriage is? This is a dud. I don't want it. I don't like this. Well, I don't want this Trump is trying to run my life. You know, you don't want that. You want to have all of the things that are going to help you. And then, and this is my last point for real. Don't wait until you need help to work on your marriage.
Right.
Most people do not watch stuff like this or share stuff like this or even pay attention to stuff like this until something happens in their marriage. Why would you do that? Why don't you protect it from ever happening? You know what I'm saying? I another thing that I read about was this man. He had given this. He was they were probably in their. They had been married for 60 something years, long time. They were probably in their 80s. And they were like, what keeps your marriage, exciting and it keeps it great or whatever. And she was like, he always brings me flowers every week and he always holds the door for me. And I'm like, oh, that's real cute, but that's crazy. But it was more to it than that. He was always very attentive to her. He gave her what it is that she loved and what she needed. And, saying all that to say this, that, you really want to make sure that you are pouring into your spouse, that you're giving back, that you are you're working on your relationship. And they were like, well, have you guys ever had at any time where your husband or either one of you have stepped out of the relationship? And no, they had never had. Nobody had ever cheated. Nobody had ever did. He was like, there's nobody in the world that's worth, that's better for me than her. And, and she was like, he's always trying to be frisky and always trying to touch me. And they were in their 80s. He was like, because I like her. And if she let me touch her, I'm going to touch her. And they're in their 80s. But again, working on that relationship, working on that love makes stuff not happen in your relationship. And then you don't have to have a disaster for you then be like, oh my gosh, somebody help my relationship is falling apart, and then especially things like when couples move from place to place, or they move outside of a city and they're outside of their normal accountability partners. And you may not have an accountability partner per se, but in your world, those are your accountability partners. Your friends, a lot of times, those are people that are holding you accountable for how you are living your life. If you riding dirty, they gonna know, eventually, and they're going to hold you accountable for how you're acting. But people that move away from that type of thing, then that accountability kind of diminishes, because you don't have that community a lot of times and I don't even know why I said that. But anyways, it has that community. You don't have that community. So you have to really watch it. But guard your marriage, guard your life, guard your love, so that bad things don't happen. And then you don't have to go and back to try to fix something.
Yeah, that's very good. And a good marriage tool or a good relationship tool is knowing the difference between empathy and sympathy. And a lot of times it doesn't matter if you're married or whatever relationship that you're in, to get your partner, to get your spouse, to get yourself from bitter to better, you have to not confuse empathy with sympathy. And what sympathy means is that, I feel sorry for you. I pity you. Oh, yeah, you have these emotions, but, oh, well, that's your emotions. So as a spouse, I sympathize with you because I pity you. But when you empathize with somebody, you're saying, I take what you're going through and I value it as my own. Yeah. And because I value you, and we were one when we're married, and how Christ has set up marriage and how to love each other as a church, when I can emphasize with how you're feeling, then I'm able to look into myself and say, what can I do to make this better? What can I do to not make you bitter? Am I doing everything that I can? And then I'm able to also listen and be like, sometimes it's not a solution that I have, but my solution is being a man, being able to pray for you, being able to set the tone, being able to make sure that you are not taking life and looking at it as a way that is not what Christ wants us to have, and saying that, because I empathize with you, I'm getting really sleepy, but because I love you and because I care about your feelings, and because I value who you are, and because I'm tenderhearted towards you, then I can help you get from bitter to better, and you can help me get from bitter to better.
Absolutely.
Because we take that time out in each other to love each other, and that's very important. So just in closing, we just challenge you, don't let life change your name.
Yeah.
Naomi's name went from my pleasure, my goodness, to my joy, to my sorrow. And, but Joseph, even when he was in the pit, even when he was in jail, he had a positive attitude that kept him in a presence of mind to expect what God had for him. And even though Naomi changed her name, she had that ride or die. So be that ride or die for your spouse, like Ruth was, to say that no matter what you're going through, I'm going to be there with you for the end, and we're going to come out of this victorious.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, again, we thank you guys so much. Next week, invite somebody to join you on these. Please share it. Please like it. Tell your friends about it. Tell the single friends. Tell your married friends. Tell your ones that are thinking about getting married. Tell the ones that used to be married. Tell everybody about us, and help us share these helpful tools on marriage and relationships and on love. If you practice these things, you'll definitely be blessed. And we know that there are going to be good things and good results that will come out of this.
Definitely watch our helpful videos. Hopefully our marriage quotes that we'll be sending out this week on Facebook and Instagram. You can always watch this over again. Please share this with somebody, like my wife said, on Facebook. You can also follow us on our YouTube page at WhatsApp Video. All of everything that we talked about, every single series, this series of Love in 60 Seconds, has been 12 episodes, I believe now. All 12 episodes are on Facebook, so go take and on YouTube.
Yeah.
We appreciate you guys. See you guys next week, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Oh, and we got some funny content coming up too. So we got some videos that'll be coming out real soon. So look for those. All right. God bless you. We love you all.
Love in 60 Seconds. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.